Why, hello there, and welcome to another episode of the Innovantage Podcast, where business meets tech to bring you your competitive edge. As always, I'm your host, Max, and it is my ongoing duty and my continuous challenge to talk about things that aren't AI. But so far, I've been failing at the challenge, and we will see whether or not today I will succeed. Today, I am joined by my wonderful guest, Dr. Kimberley Mouvet, who is the product owner of a company, Sensotec, a company that we have briefly touched upon beforehand with our previous guests. And today we will be talking about education. We will touch upon AI, I guess, at one point, because, it's very hard not to do so, but this is not the point of our conversation here today. We will be talking about how education in and overall has evolved over the course of your career and what are the products that you feel will shape it moving forward. So, Kimberley, welcome.
Thank you, Max. I'm glad to be here.
It's always nice to hear that people are glad to be here because you do have to travel a bit of a way to get to our studio, especially in this time of the year where it's gray, warm, and wet, and all of that wonderful stuff. So tell our viewers a little bit about yourself. I know that you have a wonderful career path, and I would love to hear it from you.
You're right. I don't have the career path that you've previous guests have had, I think, because I have almost no technical knowledge, but I do have a passion for language. And I've always had that. As long as I can remember, I've been interested in how language really works. Why do we call it a table? Why do we call it a chair? Part of that is because I was raised bilingually, which made it more tangible for me that sometimes we call it a chair and sometimes we call it a stool. So based on that, I've always been very interested in what does language actually do. Started studying the classics to find out the answers that they had come up with because they struggled with the same things, basically. But that study usually focuses more on literature. And because those did not really give me the answers that I was looking for, I started focusing more on linguistics. I've tried to cover many fields of linguistics, so going from the historical linguistics first into what is called sign linguistics, because both really talk about the origin of language. The first, historical linguistics, talks about how language evolves from basic systems to the languages that we have now, whereas sign linguistics, in my case, was focused on how a child develops language. So these are 2 points of view on the same issue. How does language really evolve? Which then eventually led to my PhD research, where I had a look at how children with cochlear implants how they developed language, either in spoken language or in sign language, and what was the most convenient way for them to do that. No surprise, of course, the more communication, the better. And so that's what the research also showed. After that, I really wanted to bring it to practice and see how can I help unlock the written word for the most diverse group. So I've taught very young children with hearing problems in the classroom in primary school, all the way up to adults trying to learn a non-native language. And that means both English or Dutch or whatever language they wanted to learn that I knew about. And in between, there is teaching in the auditoriums for university students and also in secondary schools. So pretty much the entire range of education has passed through my hands. And as I grow older, which I do,
It's good that you are the only one who does that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I am safe.
But with that comes more experience, right? And what I felt was that you can teach on a very small level. So you're teaching to a class or you're teaching an individual or a small group. And that means that you cannot unlock the word for many people. And that led to Sensotec, basically, where we develop educational tools that help access written language to people with reading disabilities and challenges. That's how I landed there.
That's quite a career path. Like I said, that's a very interesting kind of, it seems very logical as a step-by-step where every single step is very understandable how you've took it over time. But if you took it, from the very beginning, studying initial linguistics and just being grown up bilingual and then ending up as a product owner for a technical product and not, not some other type of product, but specifically a technical one, could be a little bit jarring. But so far, it seems like you possess a wealth of experience of how education actually works, especially for people with disabilities and limited educational abilities overall. So let's talk about the role of tech, I guess, in all of that path. Like, tech has always played a role in education, I feel, larger or smaller. And now, of course, a lot of it is being dominated by AI. And there's a lot of talk that, we're not going to be needing teachers anymore. AI is going to be doing the teaching. And then the learning is also going to be done by AI. And I don't know. So what's your take on it? What's the role of tech in education?
I think that depends on what level you are teaching at. So you had an episode with Dominic, who was teaching at university.
Yes.
And there you said something that pained my heart so much. The drudgery of reading a book, whatever do you mean? But you're right. When you are older and you're at university, you already know what a good answer looks like. You may not know what the answer is, but you know what it looks like. So when you feed ChatGPT your chapter by chapter to find the answer, you know when you have it. When you are much younger and you're in primary school, what you're focusing on is learning how to read, learning how to write, how to do multiplications. And everything that you are learning and that you're interested in is very close. It is in your immediate environment. And as a result, you don't really think about AI because it's physically there. So you don't really need technology to focus on that. And I can test that with my children or with other children that I know. You see that their immediate reaction is not, let's look it up in the computer, but let's go there and see it. But when you're in secondary school, it's a whole different picture. Of course, the main objective in secondary school is to become an adult, to develop your personality. So they are less focused on learning per se, and they want quick results, and they want to move forward with that personality development. I generalize, of course, there are ups and downs to both. But what I have found, and this is also something I read recently in an article or an interview with Chomsky. I think you know Chomsky,
yeah,
the generative linguist. Let me put it like that. And he said that AI is harmful to the uninformed. So when you were asking ChatGPT, can you make a summary based on the chapters that I've given you? You know what a summary looks like. You have an opening statement, you have point by point, and then a concluding element. If you don't know what that is, you don't recognize it as being good or bad. If you've never learned anything about the history of, the Spanish Civil War, then you don't know that, let me just make up a name here, King Claudius was not involved. You don't know this. So in secondary schools, it's much more harder, I think, for students to be able to leverage in a positive way. So should we be using tech in secondary schools? I think so, yes. But how? That's really the question. Do we just hand it over to students and say, here, make an essay and it'll help you? Or do we try to involve them in the process of how it really works and how they can use it to their advantage? To give you a practical example, I had two students, both of them were dyslexic. I asked them a fairly simple question to write a little piece on it. And one student had asked ChatGPT, copy-paste it, put it in the assignment, send it. The other had asked ChatGPT, copy-pasted it, and then adjusted it to what he wanted to say. Not what ChatGPT said about it, but changing it a little bit. Because of the similarities between the two, it was very easy for me to spot, I think the two of you may not have done all of this work yourselves. But the one who added got the marks. The one who copy-pasted didn't. Because they didn't look at it and they don't know what they've handed in. Whereas the guy who changed it, he did. And that's really what we have to navigate education towards so that they can use it efficiently.
I think that's a very wonderful point that you brought up, is the engagement of the educator themselves. Because as the student that did get the marks, you've also taken the time to take a look at the two examples of a generated content and see the difference between 1 and 2. Because I feel like, due to many factors, not least of them being the overall strain that educators feel, is that there is a huge temptation of just, copy pasting all of the homework into a ChatGPT tester, and if anything comes out positive, you don't get the marks, and that's it. Why even read that, right? Students are not spending their time writing it. Why do you need to spend your time reading it? And it's kind of a system which is lose-lose for all parties involved, to my mind. So how do you balance that? How do you learn? I don't know. How do you do it? Spend so much time reading on things that make no sense sometimes, and finding those nuggets of progress, I guess.
To be honest, sometimes they don't make sense even without ChatGPT. But how do you do it? Well, there are two sides. First of all, my honest opinion is that if you don't want your students to use AI for anything, don't use it yourself. You see that a lot on social media and in the teacher groups that I'm in. They would ask, which AI tool can I use to detect whether my student has used AI so I don't give them any marks? This is hypocritical. Either you use it or you don't. If you use it, be honest and upfront about it as well, because that's what you want from your students, right? If you want your student to say, look, I've used ChatGPT to do this, this, and this, and then I improved on it by doing this, this, and that, then you, as an educator, have to give the example of how to do that. So you should say, I wanted to find course material on topic X. So I drafted this, gave it to ChatGPT, and this wonderful tool made it into whatever, into a podcast, for instance, for you to listen to. That is an open and upfront way of saying, I've done work, then asked any AI tool to help me, and then worked on it a little bit more. If this is what you want from your students, you have to model it yourself. And then you can also try to engage them in doing it by doing it in the classroom. You might say, here's a good example of an essay. This is a bad example. Which one was made by AI, you think, and why? So that they start thinking about it more critically. Because I was wondering, this caption, AI is the death of homework. It's not. It's the death of, or it may be the death, let me put it like that, of individual critical thinking. And AI itself is not the cause of that. I think that's very important. You have to, as a student, as a teacher, you have to motivate them to start that critical thinking even on AI or despite AI, but make sure that the critical thinking is the objective, not the AI.
See, that's a very hard thing to do, I think, most of the time. Critical thinking skills are one of the hardest to come by and develop, in my own opinion, again.
It's true. It's very true. It's very hard because it's not explicit.
Yes. And it's very hard to teach. I feel like it requires a lot of self kind of engagement with any material that you consume. Mm-hmm. And talking about popular sayings, I think that there is a popular saying that I see all the time on the internet right now, is that media literacy is dead, generally speaking. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, is due to the fact that critical thinking is not engaged in media a lot of the time, where, even from the very young age, if you're watching cartoons and you're just seeing pretty colors and that's it, hey, that's fine. If you're like 30, 40 something and you're watching a movie and all you're seeing is just people, punching each other and running, still, maybe that becomes a problem because you're not critically thinking about a piece of art. And if you're not critically thinking about a piece of art, what it's trying to say, does it have an agenda, does it have any politics, and so on and so forth, then you do the same for most things that surround you. Mm-hmm. And that leads to zero critical thinking skills at the end of the day. So how do you think, how do you teach somebody critical thinking? Is there any way?
Scaffolding and starting very, very small. So you might say, I'm thinking in the very, very, very lowest levels, you might say, do you like this color? Yeah, you like it? This is your favorite color? Why? This is always the most important question. And it's also one of the questions that children themselves ask very, very often to the annoyance of their parents. But this is critical thinking skills. And you should never say, I don't know, or just because. Well, you can, of course, if you get really, really tired with them. But this is what you need to engage in. Why? Why do you like that movie? What makes it so special to you? Why do you like Pokemon so much? What does it tell you? Why do you feel engaged? It's the same with students who say, I don't like to read. There are a lot of students who say that. But why? Why do you not like to read? Rather than being the angry teacher and saying, oh, reading is very important and you have to do this and then you will develop as a person. Why don't you like to read? What is it in reading that you don't like? Is it the story? Okay, let's see whether there are different kinds of story for you to look at. Maybe you like this one. No, why not? It's always the why question. And the earlier you can start with why questions to very young children, the better results you'll have, is my opinion.
Okay, that does make sense. I do have two younger brothers.
Why does it make sense?
Because I do have two younger brothers. And my age difference with them is like 12 to 15 years. So when they were coming up, I was already fairly becoming an adult myself. And I remember that phase in them of asking why all the time and losing my mind a little bit over it. But looking back, now that they are much older men, one is 23, the other is 21. So they have...
Very old.
Yeah, like practically ancient by our standards nowadays. But they do have their personalities kind of set already at a particular point. They are already people, they stop being children. And I can see, the roots of who they became right now, even then. Like their personalities, which haven't crystallized, of course, back then, have had that initial push of either being very, very critical towards everything that's going on. That's one of them. And the other is, on the other hand, very, very accepting to everything that's going on. And I think they managed to find a balance for themselves where, one made a step towards being more accepting and the other made a step backwards, so to speak, towards being more critical. But it does kind of paint a nice picture in my mind when I look back and apply what you're talking about, that is the beginning of critical thinking and you need to encourage it as a parent. And I don't have kids myself yet, but if I do have them at some point in my life, I would be very afraid of the temptation of just giving them ChatGPT to answer all of that questions. Like, why? Take ChatGPT, and it will probably be so perfect at that time that it will just reply much better than I ever could. It will just know everything.
And that's the benefit of developing skills, because at the beginning they won't be able to write nor read. So you will have to do that for them.
Yeah, but they can talk. And
they still cannot read.
Yeah, that's true. But the AI can talk to them and they can talk to it. And it's probably going to be a seamless voice assistant. It scares me a little, that it's very easy to be disengaged. Like in the beginning of our conversation, it's very easy to just Control-C, Control-V, all of the homework into ChatGPT, give them marks, give them kind of a sentence of what to improve and, go on and have your rest. Because, like I said, not being an educator myself, but, as you probably have felt many, many times, being an educator is a very big challenge. It's not the easiest job in the world at all.
It's not the easiest job. No, that's true. And I do think it's a bit of a calling. You really have to, how should I say, be strong in what you believe, so that you can also convey that to other people, and not only the children in your classroom, but also your colleagues and management, even there. You have to make sure that you know what you're doing, that you want to do it, and how you want to do it. And even if they push back, which in secondary school they most often do, you have to make sure that you have that why question ready. So to give you an example, there's in Dutch, there's a grammatical construction. And one of the kids, I think it was in a technical education, so he wasn't interested in learning how to do grammatical analysis of Dutch. Cool, I understand. But why are we learning this? Why am I teaching you about this grammatical construction? Is it because later in your life you will have to say, this is, I think, is a past participle? No. But you will have to do analysis. In anything that you do, you will have to do analysis. If you grow up to be a carpenter, you will still have to be able to say, okay, I need a hammer and I need a nail, and the nail has to be this long, so I've done analysis of that. This is what we're teaching. We're not teaching the grammar of Dutch. We're teaching you to do analysis on abstract concepts. And then he went, yeah, you're right. I like this class. So flipped entirely. And I think that's really what you have to be able to do. You have to know what you're teaching and why and how it is relevant to them. And it might be difficult to do that at first. So that's why it's very important to have a personal connection with your students, so you know what they think is important and why, so that you can anticipate and play into that.
Which is a hard thing to do.
Emotionally taxing thing to do. Yeah.
At the very least. And then when you have, a situation of a teacher having like 2 classes of 30 people in them, where you're swamped with stuff you need to do inside of the classroom, outside of the classroom, with the politics that you need to be a part of when you're part of schools or colleges or universities or whatever. So again, not speaking from experience, but correct me if I am wrong in that assumption.
In parts of that, I shall say, when I stopped teaching, I had 240 students.
Oh wow!
So you don't have 60; you have many, many more.
240. That's enough to conquer something. If they were Romans, they would definitely conquer something with that number.
Yeah, and diverse ages as well. So it's not like 240 16-year-olds. I was teaching from the age of 15 up into 18. And you have to know all of them. Well, you cannot do that. It is impossible. And here AI can help you, so that what often happens is that the worst of your class you know very well, and the best of your class you know very well. But how about the majority middle performance? So these you kind of have to know as well. And how can you do that? AI can help you in many, many ways here to see where are they struggling. Because I haven't got the time to go over 240 essays and see how did they perform compared to the previous time they had to write an essay. So if AI can capture that for you and say, look, here we see this or that happening, it sees this or that happening. You have to pay attention to this particular person for this or that reason. It will help you diversify in your 240 group of students. So that, I think, but also it's really just the conversations outside of the classroom that make a difference. With one of these middle performer students, I think he was 15 years old, I had a secret handshake. So when we would meet each other in the hall, we would just do the handshake and didn't say anything. When I was teaching them about pronunciation, I said, bird is a word. It is just for that R that is in both words. So when we would meet each other in the hall, they would say, Kimberley, bird. And that's how you do it. So you make it fun. You make them want to engage with you rather than you have to engage with each individual student. But that's not easy to do.
I can only imagine. Education has played a big role in my own life as well. So it's been a journey, so to speak, both like the beginning of it and even the first classes, and then middle school and high school and university and so on and so forth. And you do remember the teachers that make the extra effort. And you do remember the teachers that don't.
This is true. Yeah. But Sorry.
Yeah,
I
but
am
why?
again. But why do you remember those as well?
Because they actually taught me something, and not just what's written down, because you can always read what's written down. Thankfully, the written word has existed for a very long time. We do have access to that wondrous luxury of technology. But it's about finding the correct words, like you say. It's about triggering the specific, brain functions that make the information stick, that are relevant to you. And no teacher can know that for certain, because I don't think students know that for certain. There's some stuff that I remember still that I did not know that I would be remembering for now. Like, for example, when I was studying phonetics in university, I was thinking, oh my God, why am I studying this stuff? I
So
already
familiar.
speak English so well, like as a second language, right? Why do I need to go deeper into the English language and understand that there is a second hidden language underneath that with its own rules and its own letters and how you read them and how they are pronounced, to just give more insight into the things that I already know and use daily. But it turns out that I do. It turns out that that's a very interesting thing to note, and it gives you that insight, that understanding of a language that no other thing can do. And I am thankful to my phonetics teacher at that time, professor, for helping me, overcome that, because the learning process itself was interesting, because it was engaging. And through that, I gained an appreciation of phonetics, which I did not have before.
That's because you asked the question, why do I need to know this? And he answered it for you.
Yeah, it was a she, but
Or she let you answer it, basically, I should say, because she didn't tell you it's important because I think it is. But you found out through the education, through conversations, through instruction, that it teaches you more than just how to write a phonetic or phonetic transcription of, in my case, it was Little Red Riding Hood. You find out more if they give more. If the teachers give more, you give more. And basically, that's the way education goes. And it's not, most often even, it's not about what you're teaching. Most often, it's not about that. If you think back to that wonderful teacher, you remember the person. You don't remember what they're teaching. You remember bits and pieces because, again, anecdotes come to your mind where you remember, they were talking about this and they had this wonderful joke about it. That's what you remember. You don't remember what they were teaching. Not really. But it makes you as a person. It comes back to the debate of nature and nurture as well. We were talking about your brothers. They have the same nurture, but do they have the same nature? So they were growing up in the same environment with the same people, and yet they turned out different.
Oh yeah, very, very different.
So in education, that's the same. You have a diverse group in one situation. How am I going to get them to the same point? Do I really have to? I don't. I don't need them all to have read The Great Gatsby, but I need them all to be able to think, to ask me, why do I need to read The Great Gatsby? And I can do that by engaging with them. Gatsby, not important. Them asking the question, very important. So by engaging in conversation, treating them as adults, very important with secondary school students, you get into mutual respect, because that's what you need as a teacher, the connection with a student. That's also why teachers always say no to AI, because AI isn't a personal connection. And even if AI becomes a very big part of education, it will never be education per se, because that connection is what you remember, not the font of the material.
Hard to argue with that. My own experience does support your thesis, so nothing that I can say against it. But let's move on then. That's just the first part of your career. Now you're doing completely different things. You're not grading homework anymore. You're not working with 240 students at the same time. You are actually the product owner for Sensotec's, one of Sensotec's products. And
multiple
products.
Yes.
So you're directly influencing the implementation of technology into education. So how does that work? First of all, how did you arrive that is something that you wanted to do? And what does it look like? Like, what are you focusing on? How does your experience as an educator and generally speaking, like your life experience contribute to that?
Maybe first try to answer why did I start doing that? Like I said in the beginning, when you are interacting with 240 students, you are influencing 240 students. But within this group, there was especially this one boy who had very severe dyslexia. I was having myself. But he was ashamed to use the software. At some point, he didn't want to use the software because he felt special and not like everyone else. And again, in secondary school, it's very important to be like everyone else. And that was a problem to me. I couldn't do my job as an educator because the software wasn't doing its job. Not so much that the software wasn't doing its job, but the way it was set up made sure that the kid didn't want to use it. And that's a problem for me. It's a problem for me as a person. So I went online and found out who makes these kind of things. It turned out to be Sensotec in my neighborhood. And I applied for a job there because I want to fix that for that one kid, but for all of them, basically. And that's also the experience that I bring to the job, basically. I want to make sure that what we make also responds to the problem that we're trying to solve. You can make the best text-to-speech. If it goes off with flaming torches and balloons, no one's going to use it because you don't want that. You want to be able to be like everyone else. You want to be able to access written material like everyone else. And you don't want to be the odd one out. So that's what I try to bring to the job. What will this look like in an actual setting? What will this do for a student? What will it do to a class interaction? And what will it do for the teacher? Because like you said, if you have 240 students, there's hardly any time to do anything else. So if we make solutions that are different and complex and elaborate for each different problem, we ask the teacher to learn about 5 different products. It's not very convenient. And either the products are merged into one thing that can have different outputs, or they are made very intuitive so that the teacher and the student don't really need any training to be able to work with it. So that's what I try to bring into the implementation phase as well. But earlier on, even what is the product vision? What do we want to achieve with this product? And how will it actually help? Not what will it do, but how will it help?
Okay. And do you feel like you're, I don't want to say missing the tech education part of it? So you're not a tech person yourself, right? So you don't have an engineering background like many of the people that you actually work with. Do you succeed in bridging that gap of explaining the business vision to a technical implementation, or is it more often a challenge?
I think you would have to ask them whether I succeed in it or not. But I try very hard, and I think that I'm fortunate to have very good mentors that educate me, both in a technical aspect as in translating it towards a technical audience is also very important, I think. But the team is also really, really good at it. So we have conversations, we make it visual. I try to make my point visual. They show me the code and say, this is really how it works. So if I do this, then that happens. And we really try to collaborate in that sense so that I am part of the team, not outside of the team. And that's really what I try to do. And then that's also why I brought the Pokemon, that one of the wider team, someone from support gave it to me as a support animal indeed. And that's really the kind of culture that I try to cultivate with everyone that I work with in Sensotec, but also in Zigli and Lexima, to make sure that we are conversation partners. And it's a bit from me, but it's also a bit from you. If I give, then I also expect from you. And I am fortunate to work in an environment that they actually give me quite a lot.
Well, with that mindset, I can definitely believe that that can work. And we've had both Artem and William on an episode beforehand, and they talked a lot about how the tech tries and does implement new solutions, propose new things that the business can value, and bridge the gap between the technical understanding and the business understanding. Then I had a similar question for you, right? Whether you succeed at that. So let's ask it the other way around. Do they succeed at what they try to do?
Artyom always asks me, but what kind of data do you want? So I think so, yeah. It's really a bit of a back and forth. So we really have to dance around it a few times before we get to an actual requirement. That's my inexperience I think it's my inexperience to come up with the exact answer. But also sometimes it just needs some time to make a question clear. So in many of the cases when I talk to William and Artyom, the problems are complex and it's not just one answer, and they need to. I need to think about it a little bit more before I can actually come up with a good answer. So I think they do, because they do succeed in getting me to provide answers, because they keep asking, and they keep asking the right questions. I think so. They keep asking me, but what is it exactly that you want AI to solve? And sometimes, as I said in the episode as well, it's not AI that should handle it. Sometimes it's just basic statistics. And that's fine as well. They help me to understand what it is that exactly I want, basically. And I help them to understand what the impact of their AI solutions is. So what it does in the head of an educator, what it does in the head of a student.
And from what I understand, a lot of the work in your products involves AI specifically. So would you consider yourself to be a believer in AI, generally speaking? Because we are living in a situation of maximum hype, you know? Mm-hmm. Everybody believes AI to be the fixer of all things bad. And, you know, once we implement it, it's going to be wonderful and everything will change. And it's the best invention since cut bread, basically. So what's your take on it as a business person, like from at least the business perspective? Is it or no?
It's inevitable, I think. Whether it is good or bad, that the future will show that, but it is inevitable. There is no way that we can ignore AI or not have it in any of the products. I'm very proud to say that I am the product owner of the first AI tool that we have made. So that's...
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Very proud that we can do that it helps, that it does what it should do. So that's very important as well. But cutting it out is impossible. We cannot do it anymore. So what do we have to make sure is that our products respond to the question at hand. Not just have AI because it sounds cool, but because it solves a problem the customer is having. And if we can frame that correctly and adequately, it may be also important to add, then the customer will understand why AI is the answer here. Why we use a text map to navigate through websites rather than going by word through the web page. If we can show them this is the benefit, this is how it solves your complex question, they will accept it. If we say, you had this question about, what shall we say, what next step should I take? We just did something. We'll not tell you how it works, but trust us, this will never work. This will never work. So you have to be able to explain why AI and how AI does the trick for them.
Okay. So I'm guessing you are successful in bridging that gap. There is enough back and forth between you and the technical team to actually implement the products you're working on. And considering the fact that AI is inevitable, let's take it as a fact for now. What do you feel are the limitations of it in terms of ethics, for example? Because like we said in the beginning, there are many examples where ethically using an AI solution is questionable, but it is the easiest thing to do. Again, it's very easy for a student somewhere in middle school to just type a few letters, copy paste it, and go outside playing football or whatever else, right? And the same for educators. You have 240 students. It's very easy to just Control A, Control C, Control V, and go out and, have some fun for the change, right? So what do you feel like, are there any ethical concerns that you put in the forefront when you're developing your products, and what are they?
I think there are many ethical concerns. Not all of them are relevant to our products, but in general, I think there are a lot of things to consider. But that's the case for any technology. I think it's not specific to AI. You have to be aware of what you're doing and who you're doing it for. So if you're working with small children, you need to be very much aware of what it does to them, how it works for them. So you have to be able to change mindsets a little bit and see what it does, what it means if they use it. And also, you have to be a bit like the bad cop as well. How could I abuse what I have here? And really try to break it. I was instructed, shall we say, educated by our QA engineer to break things. So I tried to take that. And again, from experience, you've seen children do the wrong thing with AI. See whether you can do that with the implementations that we have, and make sure that if you do, we counter it. So there are really small things, like, for instance, we have an application that works with text-to-speech, speech-to-text, and we have made sure that if you use curse words in any language, it crosses it out. So you don't get to use it freely, let me put it like that. But this is our responsibility, to make sure that the technology that we make is correct, up to date, and ethically sound. That means make sure that they can't cheat, basically, that there are no shortcuts. And that in turn means trying to find the shortcuts yourself and then blocking them.
So maybe you need to get in touch with all of those 240 students that you've had and just kind of let them go wild. Just do whatever it is you want. Just break it completely. I'm sure that Artem and William will cry a little bit, though, but, you need to create some pressure on the tech guys from time to time.
For sure. I also hand out or spoke to other teachers that are still in the profession, and ask them, what is the most stupid thing you've had your students do, and then see whether they can do it with our software. That's really, the conversation with the people who are still in education is also very important, I think, because it's been a year that since I last taught a class. So it's important to keep in touch with those people as well and ask them, you try to break it. How do your students try to break it now? And make sure that you're still aware of what is happening on the floor, as they say. And like you said, I often ask my children, here's a prototype. See what happens if you use it. And I learn a lot from that as well. And in many, many ways, sometimes it's as simple as, well, it's still difficult to use a mouse, for instance. But it might also be, we have arithmetic solutions as well. It takes a long time for them to get feedback. And I didn't really think that through, in the sense that for me, 20 sums is not a lot. But for someone who is just started to learn how to do sums, 20 is a lot. And so my daughter said, it would be very nice if after 5 sums, it would say, good job. I didn't think about that, but it is that first-hand experience with the children who are using it that really help us make it a good product that actually does respond to the child in a correct and ethical, sound way.
Oh, that's a very wonderful example. So junior product owners are already on the way.
Yes. Yes, they are. They are. Yeah. We also have dailies. So.
Oh, really?
We do. Yeah. So we sit around at the table and then I go, what did you do today? And what did you do today? What will you do tomorrow? So yeah, I think I may take a little bit of my job home. I'm not sure.
Well, as long as you're not asking them to learn stuff in sprints where you have an exam at the end of every sprint and then we will have a retrospective for every failed exam.
Oh, imagine that. Yeah. No.
I think that's just enough. Just enough. So maybe you can talk a bit more specifically about the products that you're working on, any particular ones that you're proud of. You've mentioned them in passing a little bit, but any more details maybe you'd like to share?
I think the one that I've mentioned, the first AI or product that has AI, web to speech, I'm particularly proud of because I was able to be there at the very beginning. That's also very important, I think. But I have used it so often and made it, for me, let me put it like that, partly because of the AI and the way it works so well, I have, for myself, discovered a new way of using it. So web to speech, as you might imagine from the name, reads aloud websites. So what I did to test it, so in the earlier phases, was have it read out the news to me while I was doing cooking. While I was doing anything in the house, it would read out the news to me. And if it failed, then I knew, there's a bug here. But if not, then I had heard the news and the things that I was interested in. And that showed new potential in an already existing product because it works so well with AI. I'm really proud of that it opened up a new market, so to speak, from educational perspective to a wider audience, because everyone can use that. Everyone has a lack of time, and therefore it's easy if you can access written material spoken to you. That's really nice. I'm really proud of that as well.
Does that work in Dutch and English, or what languages does it read?
It works in Dutch, it works in English, it works in French, German, Spanish, Portuguese, Turkish, Russian, Ukrainian, and I think 2 or 3 more languages that I forget. Polish is one of them as well. And I know that because they taught me curse words to see whether it works well. So yeah, very good team. So that one I think is very important to me. And the other one is called Sprint Tempo. Why am I particularly proud of that? Because it diverges from its parents, Sprint Online. It's bigger brother, if you like. But what this does is a guarantee that the student knows how to do the sums. So what the aim of Sprint Tempo is to teach or to help students go from knowing how to do a sum to how to do a sum quickly. And the way we have designed that, we have made sure that student will, at the end of the program, be in fact able to do that, no cheating. So, like I said, it's very important to see where are the shortcuts, and we have designed it in such a way that you have to prove it in 2 consecutive days. So the fact that translates into a good educational practice is a bonus, let me say it like that. I'm really proud of that new product as well. And then, of course, there's Bulbasaur. Yeah, the Pokemon aren't just in physical animal spirits, but they're also there in the products. Why I'm so proud of Bulbasaur is because it was developed with teachers. So we started from web to speech, actually. So what can that do, and how can we help teachers, not students, but teachers, to improve their teaching using something like that? And together with my tech league Flood, we came up with an idea and then brought that immediately to teachers. Here's what we're thinking about, more or less. What do you think? What do you need? And what do you not need? Also very important. What does it do that you don't want it to do? And because of that, their early involvement, I think it's a much better product. It's not finished. It is nowhere near finished. But it's better already because of their involvement, because of the step that we as a company were brave enough to take to go to the public, to the customer base immediately, even before they were customers. And I think that's also something to be proud of.
Yeah, I completely agree. So talking more on that then, how do you feel the customer perspective? So an educator that is looking to implement AI solutions, being yourself both an educator and a person who's responsible for producing those kinds of solutions, what would you recommend to look out for? Like, how do you actually implement a solution that you've never used before into a classroom, be it AI or any other innovative technology?
It's a difficult question, I think, because usually it doesn't work like that. It's top down.
Oh, yeah.
school boards have decided which technology you are going to use. And often in a training day or they call it training day, but it's 2 hours, that you have to perform outside of the school. So in your free time, of course, you have to learn this new technology and then implement it immediately because students need it. Okay. How do you do that? Well, upfront, hey guys, we need to use this. I don't know how it works. Let's figure it out together. And here, analytic thinking comes back in, critical thinking. You ask your students, look, here's the manual. I don't really know how it works. Let's look at it together. What steps do you see? And then the education already starts with the implementation. So it's not the tool itself. Again, it's the process of implementing it that you can already use to use the core solution. So that is how I would do it. Thinking about technologies that I've used in that way is really what I've tried to do. So do it, students, look at it with me together. And I've learned a lot like that as well. So, and not realizing how old you are, that sort of thing, when they come up. So there's actually a shortcut for that. You could do it like that, and then they are really proud that they've taught you something. You feel very old, and the process is started. And that's I think how you should do it. The same with our technologies would be: look, here's the thing that we have, Sprint Tempo. We want you to use it. How do you use it, and why do you use it? Okay, explain to the teacher. Now, explain it to the student as well. How would you implement it like this? Okay. Well, have you thought of asking the student to do it with you together? Okay, let's do that. So again, the personal connection is very important, and make sure that the technology helps, supports, and not replaces. Because if you give the teacher the impression that it will replace them, they will not use it.
But then again, you said yourself that the board has a deciding voice here. And those people, depending on the type of school, definitely can be very...
managerial is
managerial is a nice word. Thank you very much. They can be very managerial and can be very by the numbers in their approach, where replacing teachers and raising a bottom line can be a very attractive proposition. How do you see that problem? Like, is it going to be a problem moving forward where, in the very corporate mindsets, a quick solution to many, many problems is just kind of slapping AI on it and hoping for the best? Or do you have more trust in our education systems?
I think, but it's an opinion. Let me put it like that. So it's not based on anything, but I think the boards expect more people than AI. And it's okay for the people to use AI in their teaching, but they expect it from the people. And in this, AI can be an ally again. Going back to my own experiences, you need to write feedback and feed forward for each student, 240 students. Do not limit yourself to a single sentence. Don't say, good job, continue like this. This is the way management would look at it. I call it management because they basically are. They would look at the feedback that you're giving and telling you you're not doing a good job. But usually this feedback, no one reads it. Do you remember reading feedback on any assignment that you've ever done?
A few, but only
the bad ones.
A few. The contested ones, so to speak, where I had a very big difference of opinion, regardless of it either being good or bad. I remember the stuff that I did very, very unfocused, so to speak, and received good feedback. And I'm like, even I don't think that, like, what the hell? And then I remember stuff where I actually applied myself and I actually did the work, and the feedback was like, you obviously didn't do anything. Like, there's nothing obvious about it because that's not true. But those are only a couple of ones that would stick out in my mind.
And yet, all your teachers wrote feedback on all your assignments. And here, I think this is how AI can help you. Have they engaged with the feedback? Have they just opened it even? And have they tried to apply it? But also help me write it. Help me write good feedback that is actually valuable for the student. But be aware that they may not read it. And therefore, try to educate your management as well. I only use the feedback that is actually valuable. A friend of mine teaches Latin, and she was called into the principal's office because her feedback was too short. They have tests of 10 words each, 10 words. Have you done a good job? How do you write a paragraph about that? So you could say, and I helped her. I said something, you have shown that you have opened your book. You have shown that you have engaged with these 10 words and that you are still able to remember them over the course of 5 days. Well done. Keep it up. Next time, make sure that you also memorize the next 10 words. This is not useful. This is not useful for anyone and just takes a lot of time. But if this is a requirement, then at the very least, see whether with AI you can spot patterns that are useful to comment on. You might say, I see that in the last 10 times you had a test on Latin words, you always have difficulty with this one particular detail. 240 students, you absolutely cannot know that for 10 tests down the road. So that is why it could be helpful for you and how it can respond to management as well.
That's a great example. I like it. It's the thing that LLMs can do best. Just create more words out of nothing. That's an easy task for them to do. And if you direct them a little bit, and like you said, search for patterns, search for something that you've missed, it's something that I do in my work a lot of the time because I cannot read a huge document very precisely, very attentively all of the time. Sometimes I do have the time for it, sometimes I do not. But at least when I use an LLM to help me read through something, I can focus on particular things. Is there anything out of place? For example, when reviewing a contract, for example, right? At the very least, did anything change in between the last revisions? Just compare the two texts. Or is there anything out of place for a contract of that size or of that type? Is there anything that I need to focus on specifically when reading it? And yeah, it brings up a whole other question of whether or not it's a good idea to upload any sort of documentation to a outside provider. But,
Ethical responsibilities.
Ethical responsibilities, yeah, it's up to the individual to actually, understand where the limits are. And that circles back to the very beginning of education overall and being literate towards what kind of data you provide and to whom. So a very basic example that we've brought up on the show before is that if you're in a professional working environment and you do have a Microsoft suite, using Copilot AI for Microsoft is a much better option than any other else because it does secure your data. At least they promise to. And at that point, your data is already owned. Well, not owned, but Microsoft already has it because you are using SharePoint, because you are communicating in Teams, because you are looking at Outlook. So everything is already there. You're not risking that much. But if you're bringing an outsider into this whole system, then it's one more point of risk.
It's also something that teachers worry about with their materials as well. If you, so that's one of the things that came out of the conversation with them. If we are making a teaching assistant, make sure that it is a closed system and all of my material doesn't float on the internet and everyone has access to it. And I have put a lot of effort in it, but now everyone is using it for free. So I understand the concern of having a closed system and make sure that you know who owns your data. Same is true for the students. If something is proctoring the way they act in the classroom, at the very least, it has to stay in the school and not beyond, and even maybe just with the teacher. But that has to be guaranteed, and that's a responsibility that you as a company have to say. And you just said Microsoft promises that it does that. I don't know, but it says that it does. So,
and you're already in a position where you are sharing the data and you don't really have a choice.
You don't have a choice.
If I did have a choice, I would love to not use Teams. I'm going to be honest with you on that, but...
Don't we all?
What can I do? I just kind of have to. But yeah, that's a very important point that we've also brought up in the last episode and the episodes beforehand is the level of literacy of any individual that uses these tools. Thankfully, well, at least theoretically, educators should have a more, self-conscious approach to it, to understand the limits of it a bit more than your average user, average individual. But then again, they are counterbalanced by the students, so it all evens out at the end.
True. Although we do have classes on cookies.
Yeah.
What are cookies? And why do you always just click consent without reading
Yeah,
what it
disclaimer,
says.
the cookies that are in the web, not the one that you bake, because not baking classes.
Yes, well, yes.
Those maybe as well, but we're not the ones that we're talking.
Exactly, yeah. So there are classes that say to students, read it, please read it. And it makes you as an educator, as a person, also more aware that you are actually doing the same thing. You want to go to a website and say, hey, we've got cookies, but you don't read this very long text, and you just click consent. Why do you do this? What are you consenting to? This is, I think, also, it's interesting that this comes from students to teachers, then becomes a subject of teaching, of instruction, which then again influences both parties. But this one is, I think, a very good example. And the same with GDPR. It's also part of the curriculum now. So what is it exactly? Why is it there? What do you become responsible for when? And do you want this data to be available to this party? So the fact that that is a conscious effort is, I think, very important in education as well.
Indeed. I am, well, I wouldn't say a fan of regulation as a whole, but I am a supporter of it. I do see how our colleagues from all over the pond in the US live and look at us in Europe, and I do see a lot of improvements that the regulations have brought. Namely, at the very least, in your cookies example, every website that I visit, when they ask for cookies, I say no.
You can't say no. So it's an option that you have now. Yeah.
In Europe, you can, because they are regulated to do so. And they are regulated to do so that pressing no takes you the same amount of effort as pressing yes. So they cannot hide that in some sub-menu somewhere in 10 menus away and 10 pages away or whatever. And every time that I press no, I feel like, regulation works. Nope, not going to give you my data. Go away. But,
But you need to be told that. If you don't know what is there and what it is that you're consenting or not consenting to, how do you know which choice to make?
Indeed.
Circling back to critical thinking.
Indeed. So that has to be the first step. So you understand what cookies are, and you kind of understand what kind of data they farm about you and keep about you. And then if you read a bit about the specific cookies, you will understand what for that data will be. And then you will start noticing patterns where some websites collect a lot of stuff, just obscene amounts. And then you notice the other ones where they're like, oh yeah, we just need functional cookies to just understand who you are as a user and provide you essential services, and that's it. And then you can form an opinion about what kind of services you use and what kind of websites you frequent and so on and so forth. Without that, you just see a menu and you click.
Yeah, exactly. And also, if you do click yes, you know why, or you know at least what the responsibilities are or where they are now.
Yeah.
If you say yes, it's you saying, go ahead. So you can't really then argue with the website anymore because you've said yes.
Yeah.
And if you don't, there are a lot of children and a lot of young people, let me put it like that, that still say, it's okay, I'll just say yes. I know that I do that sometimes as well. Just say yes because it's easy. But I also know that means I give you my data. And that's important.
Oh, yes. And we've talked about the importance of data beforehand. And when you listen to the engineers, they know the importance of data. Business people might not as much because they always like the impact of that data, what it brings, the insights, the possibilities, the models that tell you where to look and what to sell and so on and so forth a lot of the time. But the engineers know the value of the data because they work with it day in, day out, and they can build many, many very wondrous and very frightful things out of the data.
Yes. That's why I'm always very impressed. So when Artyom asks me, but what kind of a data do you need for this question? And I always think, well, isn't it self-evident? But it never is. It's never that easy. And that's really interesting to find out as well, because what is data exactly? And what kind of a data do you need? And why do you need it? And why do you need consent for this? And again, I'm really like that small child. Why do you need this? And why do you want that? And it's really interesting to see how his mind works when he's thinking about data as well. Fortunately, he does it out loud, so I can learn from that.
Not a bug, a feature. Actually,
oh my God, don't say that.
We've talked a lot about education overall and the products that are aimed at education overall. We haven't really emphasized the higher education aspect of it. And you having a PhD, you're very much intimately familiar with the higher education landscape, so to speak. And me personally, I've studied at the Antwerp Management School for a partial master's, basically last year, a couple of years ago. It's been a while. And what I do remember is that ChatGPT blew up exactly as I was studying. So that was the tool that you were trying to use in education. And, those initial kind of critical understandings of the limits of the system and what you can do and what you can't do and so on and so forth were born through that process where, okay, here's a new tool and here's my situation. How can I apply to it? Thankfully, my thesis on the end of it was not written by ChatGPT, but at the same time, I cannot say that it was not helping me. I hope my professors do not look at this episode. So how does your experience look like? You wrote your dissertation before ChatGPT, right? So
Yes.
You had to do it the old school way. Would you have changed your approach in any way with the current tools available?
Probably, but maybe not in the way that you would expect it. I would use ChatGPT more or any other to find the right outlets. So it's very difficult to know all the journals that you have to publish in and which ones are more strategically important or which one would fit the topic that kind of thing. I think I would use ChatGPT for more because I was in an experimental setting and then it can really not tell me very much in an experimental qualitative way because that's not what it does, basically. Sure. What I see or saw the students do is shape up their assignments. So I have to write an essay. So here's the basic outline, write it for me, then change it a little bit. And I'm okay with that. It's fine. It's more important to have a good logic to think about things than to be able to write it down in an eloquent way. But that also means, and that's very important, to communicate to students that they will not be evaluated on the way they have written things. They will not be evaluated on how eloquent it was, but they will be evaluated on the core ideas that are there. Fortunately, AI does not think. We think. So that is something that shines out very clearly. And I used to ask, if you're going to plagiarize, please do it in the first sentence. So I don't have to read your entire assignment to see in the last sentence they plagiarized. It's the same with AI. If you're going to use AI, just tell me up front, and then I know what to focus on immediately. Because sometimes you've got very eloquent students that write eloquent papers on their own. And that is also a skill to appreciate and to say something about in the feedback that you think is valuable. So sometimes you might say, I noticed that you made 0 mistakes. That is impressive. Well done. But if you know that they've used, I don't know, ChatGPT to take out all of the mistakes, then I would ask, if you know that that is the case, can you give me an overview of the type of mistakes that you've made? Or can you put that in an assignment or in an attachment to your assignment so that I can also see how I can help you? Because if you hide everything with ChatGPT, how can I help you grow?
Yeah.
So again, you have to give the responsibility to them to know what they are doing with it. And it's okay to use it, but make sure that you know what you're doing and know what the impact will be.
Well,
so if you feed a book to ChatGPT, so you don't have to read it, and so this is the educator in me talking to you very sternly, you have to know that you may have missed an important point.
Of course, and it tends to hallucinate a lot, even if you do give it precise information, and it does not do very well with large amounts of information. So all of that I learned by interacting with it. Otherwise, I would not have known. Naturally, the first instinct of any bad student is just feed it a book and just give them the answers to me. And ideally, just write the whole paper for me, like Control-C, Control-V book, then write the essay or the thesis or whatever, Control-C, Control-V thesis. That's it. I am done. I am now smarter. I now have a master's degree.
And how does that benefit you?
Surprisingly and a little bit dishearteningly, it does benefit me in many ways because a degree is just a a symbol. It's the thing that opens several doors at several places in your life. It does not correlate with the amount of knowledge that you actually possess. There are many smart people with many interesting degrees, and then there are many dumb people with degrees no less interesting than those. Unfortunately, that's...
And how do you know that they are dumb? How to use it in the...
I cannot know that for certain. I can only assume that from what I hear, from what I read, my personal assumptions based on the available data, on political views and general kind of statements about everything. And then you look at their education and you say, like, oh. For example, like a very specific example would be people with degrees in like gender studies, for example, being misogynist. Like, did they teach you that in university? Like, chapter 1, women are inferior. Chapter 2, men are better. Chapter 3, that's it. Like, that's what you learn in gender studies. Then, that puts kind of a big question mark on the whole thing.
But that's the value of education, right? So the value of the title, right? Because the person, him or herself, has shown you in what they say who they are as a developed critical thinking entity, shall we say. So that's not the title. That's never in the title.
True.
It's also never in the evaluation. So you can ask someone else to write it. You don't have to ask ChatGPT. You can ask anyone to write something for you. And then that person will be evaluated on you. So how does that benefit you? It doesn't. You have the title. People talk to you and think, God, and disregard you. So it does not really benefit you because people think even more negative about you. If you hadn't seen this title, gender studies, you would have think, weird person. But now you think, what did that guy do at university? Drink? So even worse reputation because of it.
And I will have a bad opinion of the university itself.
Exactly.
That they managed to produce such a highly qualified person. So I'm not advocating for, writing your essays through chat. I am not doing it. So do not do that. I want to be extremely clear. That is a bad way to learn. I did some stuff with ChatGPT to understand how the tool works. I wrote all of my things myself. I am a good boy. My mom says so. And I did get a nice mark on the essay in the end. So, so that was an anecdotal aside, so to speak, to kind of try and wrap up our discussion. What would you say is the future of education then with those tools? Is it a good one, a bad one, where everything is AI and educators have more time to actually focus on the human relationships? Or is it a bad one where education is completely done by AI, no humans involved?
It's a difficult question, right?
So, I know. I like difficult questions in the end where people are already tired from talking and I hit them with the most difficult one.
There's a possible future, let me put it like that, where AI is in fact an ally and teachers do in fact have the time to engage in personal relationships and be of help in the personal development in which education or knowledge gathering and analysis is part. That would be awesome. Will it be? I would dare to say no. I'm not really an optimist in that sense because there are a lot of people, to go back to Chomsky, that there are a lot of uninformed people. There are uninformed people in the younger age groups, but there are a lot of uninformed teachers as well that will just rebel against using AI or go all the way over and only use AI and forget about what it still needs. So garbage in, garbage out, right? There are too many of those kind of people to have an immediate view on a better future. Let me put it like that. But I do have hope for the youngest age group that will have grown up with ChatGPT and all that sort of jazz in the same way that we grew up with computers and my children growing up with phones. It's just normal.
Yeah.
And you better understand, because it has been part of your life since forever, what the bad sides are and what the good sides are, because the people before you have experienced the bad and the good, and they can tell you about it. And it is part of your education. Again, nature and nurture. So this newest generation, the very small children, and I really mean small, like newly borns to no older than 6, I would say. This is the future. They may have the key to really have an education that is responsive to their personal needs and help them develop a personal connection to many educators and many points of view. But it'll take a lot of effort from everyone still, I think.
Well, then no rest for the wicked just yet. Still have a lot of work to do.
Fortunately, I'm a workaholic.
That's the topic for another episode, whether or not that is indeed fortunate or no. But thank you. Thank you, Kimberley. It was a very insightful conversation, and thank you for being here. And thank you all for being here as well. If you liked today's episode, like, share, and subscribe to us on YouTube. We're also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And always remember to ask the question, why, in your daily life. See ya.